Welcome to New Cyber Frontier, bringing you the latest news on cybersecurity and the local Colorado economy, focused on cybersecurity industry growth and initiatives that support cybersecurity economics. We hope this special series on blockchain builds your excitement for a possible future which empowers individual privacy. Please follow and participate as New Cyber Frontier is supporting a grassroots community effort to empower the individual in the digital age. Check out privacyforthepeople.org to see the upcoming crowdfunding campaign. Now sit back and enjoy as we introduce our great guest for today's show. Welcome to today's episode of New Cyber Frontier. On today, a great show. Stay tuned. I know you'll be interested in this one. We have a representative from Microsoft, the security advisor for health and life sciences, but Joseph Davis. And Joseph has has a great career, as you can imagine. If he's at the top in Microsoft, he's been around the block as a CISO for several medical companies, sensor companies, and in the industry with sensors in general. But Joseph, welcome today. Thanks for joining.
Oh, great to be here. Thank you.
And we caught you at home. We'd love to see those candid shots of our leader people in cybersecurity working from home in a t-shirt, because that gives us all hope that can be our life someday, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, but thanks for joining today. I would love to hear your background, just kind of a personal. How'd you get through to where you're at to running kind of these big organizations like Microsoft?
Well, yeah, it was an interesting career path, to be sure. I started off in medicine and decided that wasn't for me for several different reasons. And the closest job that I could take at the time was IBM up in Vermont. And that started my career in IT and security. I had always been a big fan of security before it was even called security competency, right? So I was involved in things like what is now known as phone phreaking and exploring networks as far back as 1978. I consider my active years 1978 to probably 1985-ish. And then, I really focused on medicine, for undergrad, grad, and post-grad, and then had a medical career, and then decided to leave that and go back to the thing I loved, which was IT, devices, software, and cybersecurity.
Mm-hmm. When you say medicine, you like a doctor? Like a medical doctor?
Yeah. So I practiced rural medicine in a little town called Brandon, Vermont, because I went to school at the University of Vermont College of Medicine at the time.
Mm-hmm. Wow, I like to hear that. Medical doctor, he's gone to the good side of the world, right? We're in technology. Love it. So, interesting background. Wow. You talk about the phreaking and back in the War Games era, right? Big fan of the Matthew Broderick movie. I showed that to my son recently, and he just loved it. And he's 18 now, but it's almost timeless because it just shows the ingenuity of a young person, and I think they all kind of jump on that aspect of it. So interesting background. Now tell us about Microsoft and what you do there.
So Microsoft is just fantastic with regards to security and compliance right now. If you asked me 5 years ago, and I tell everybody this, come to work for Microsoft and be a security evangelist, I would have kind of chuckled, because I never thought Microsoft and security would be, in the same sentence. And those were, the days where I was a Microsoft customer and we were having our challenges with vulnerabilities around Windows 7 and challenges with the products that Microsoft put out that lived in the security and compliance realm. 180-degree sea change at this point, and that's what got me very, very interested, because I feel, Microsoft's at the epicenter of most enterprises, Fortune 50, Fortune 500, and multinational. We're at the desktop level. We're at the most of the application level. So what a better place to design security and privacy in, right? So I evangelize for them. I help other chief information security officers understand what the full suite of products are.
Mm-hmm.
And we're taking a best of suite approach versus a best of breed approach, because as a former CISO, I know it took between 70 and 20 different tools to really have a comprehensive program, and most of my tools existed on the perimeter.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when you start to introduce the cloud, that perimeter is starting to dissolve, right? The physical network perimeter is no longer a thing.
Mm-hmm.
I could argue it was never a thing if you could always email an attachment, right? But at this point, it's all about identity and proving you are who you say you are. So it's a zero trust approach, and Microsoft's all in on zero trust through conditional access.
All right. Well, let's take a break here from our sponsors. Be right back in a minute to talk to Joseph Davis some more.
Cyber Resilience Institute helps build strong cyber communities designed to prevent members from attack. Like building a neighborhood watch, it takes coordination and a sharing community to protect our identities and valuables in the virtual world. Typically, we hear that organizations know they need to do something to protect their cyber assets, but don't know where to begin. Let Cyber Resilience Institute help your community create an action plan. Cyber Resilience Institute will build your community or business marketplace so that it is designed to support a collective cyber defense. Contact them for more information at cyberresilienceinstitute.org.
Welcome back to New Cyber Frontier. Today we're talking to Joseph Davis from Microsoft, security advisor for health and life service or sciences. So, Joseph, before the break, you kind of gave your background and you talked about Microsoft, a security company. That, throw that question at the end of that statement is so interesting to hear that, but it makes sense in the roundabout way that, like you said, you're in everywhere at this point. What has prompted that direction? Is that at the top level in Microsoft?
Absolutely, it's top down. And Satya, our CEO, has said, and this is not a direct quote, but this is paraphrasing, that we have to earn the trust of our customers and become one of their trusted partners. I think the whole trust concept and the data privacy concepts what turned me on to make the move to shift my career and work for a vendor. Because before this, I had never worked for a vendor directly. Vendors of other things, but nothing in cybersecurity, right? So we talked about sensors and controls of medical devices, but never cybersecurity. And once I started to hear that the Microsoft leadership really felt that data privacy is a human right, and privacy had to be built into everything that they were doing. And, this whole concept of zero trust, which harkens back to the Jericho commandments back in 2004, if anybody's familiar with those, about the perimeterless environment that we're now living in when we start to talk about a hybrid environment. So all of those really drove me to look for a role at Microsoft, because that was what I was trying to achieve as a CISO for all those years working for corporate.
Interesting. So you brought up the term zero trust, used a lot lately.
Right.
I use it with the products company that I work with, or I have, and had talked to some people who weren't technology focused people, and I used that same term, zero trust, and their initial thought is, well, why would you call yourself untrustworthy? Why would you say we should have zero trust for you? This term makes sense for networks, but if you're presenting to somebody non-technical, there's some questions to that phrase in general. Explain what zero trust means to our audience.
I'm so glad you're asking me this question, because it's actually a very simple concept. It's input, processing, and output. So let's just say we're trying to get at some documentation and we're on a go-go, in-flight wireless. I spend most of my time at 40,000 feet, so I'm doing this all the time, right? So you have to authenticate, right? You have to log in, if you will, to get access to this. So what happens behind the scenes, and Microsoft calls this specific thing conditional access, where it determines things like risk signals coming out of your user identity. Has your password been, compromised? Is it showing up on the dark web? Have you logged in seconds ago from another location, right? Are you who you say you are? And then we take signals from the device as well. Is the device compromised? Is it out of compliance, etc.? And in a split second, a decision is made to grant full access, partial access, or no access at all. And by partial access, it gets very, very interesting. You can actually say there are certain documents that are highly sensitive that if you're working from a hostile territory, or if for whatever reason you're not working from a corporate managed device, you will not gain access to those very, very sensitive documents. But if all check boxes are checked, you can gain access to those.
Interesting. So it's looking for a series of parameters around the globe, different access things, different, even dark web, you said, to determine whether you get access. So it's like multi-factor authentication on steroids. That's what your concept of zero trust is?
That's exactly what it is. So multi-factor authentication is the mechanism by which you can prove who you are, or you are who you say you are. But really, the threat intelligence that Microsoft collects in the intelligence security graph is tremendous. You look at, we're looking at about 6.5 trillion events a day. Microsoft is the number 2 targeted entity on the globe, the first being the US DoD, as far as we know. So we take all that threat intelligence and things like passwords. Has this account been password sprayed? Was this account involved in some other type of situation? Is it sharing a password with 800 of its constituents in the corporate network, right? So you could do a lot of things. You can force another factor of authentication through our Authenticator app. You can force the user to change their password if it seems like their password's been compromised. And what Microsoft's ultimately doing is trying to get to a passwordless environment to really reduce that user friction. So it's basically something you have, something you know other than a password, and something you are, which is a biometric.
Interesting. And it sounds like some kind of forensic pattern on top of that you really is what you're talking about. So yeah, there's like a fourth piece to that almost.
Right. So if you dig deep, it's about user behavior. It's signals from the user, signals from the device. So there really is a different profile, if you will, using a corporate device that's been managed versus going to grandma's house during a Thanksgiving break or something like that, and saying, well, I didn't bring any of my corporate devices, but I know that I have to finish my spreadsheet, my sales spreadsheet. So when logging on from grandma's computer, it doesn't really matter. Is it Windows 7? Is it Mac? Is it Windows 10? All this conditional access is applied to your logon situation, and it will realize that you're coming in from a non-managed computer. And it may or may not give you access to that spreadsheet, especially if it's confidential or sensitive pricing or something like that. But again, all these rules are defined by the customer. Right? It's not, these aren't rules that are defined by Microsoft. So Microsoft provides threat intel, and our customers can leverage that threat intel however they'd like.
Interesting. So when we're talking to the small business users or even individuals, Microsoft's a big facet in what we have. Most of us have on our computer, our tools and whatnot. And a lot of times security is not affordable for smaller either startups, individuals, or whatnot. Big companies have this. Threat intelligence platforms, as you said. So opening that up to the mass consumer is kind of what your focus is. Is that what I'm hearing?
Absolutely. So it's included with all of our Office 365 and Azure accounts, right? So you get conditional access no matter what. It needs to be set up on the back end to an extent. You're going to get some generic conditional access if you don't have the staff or the skill set to set that up. But nevertheless, it's something that's included, and it's available to even small to medium-sized businesses, right? One of the things that we used to have to deal with 5, 6, 7 years ago is you have to buy an appliance for each one of these functions. I remember there's a company out there that was selling something called adaptive authentication, incredibly expensive, way out of the realm of the consumer or the small to medium-sized business. It's no longer the case. Microsoft is including this capability, and it's a subscription model. So you can choose to buy 5 subscriptions like I have for my family and me, Or you can choose to buy, 5 million subscriptions if you'd like, and you're going to get the same functionality.
Okay, so we're going to take a break in a minute, but I'm going to leave you with a question that I want you to think about, and when we come back, you can give us some insight on this. So often big companies are kind of viewed as Big Brother. Do I trust everything a big company's doing? We've had so many, people in front of Congress bumbling around talking about, what they're doing with everybody's data, and you're kind of saying Microsoft is going to be the security company. They're going to be this central thing for so many companies. How do we kind of know and trust that this Big Brother thing isn't going to be a problem if we all get involved? We'll be here from our sponsors. We'll be right back to talk about that question.
Murray Security Services are your cybersecurity experts with decades of experience providing professional training services for our clients in various industries. We offer professional training and certification in areas of cybersecurity, safety, health, and environmental services at our academy. Our in-person and online training provides a collaborative environment where students can interact directly with instructors through live chats or in private classrooms. Visit murraysecurityservices.com for more information.
Welcome back to New Cyber Frontier. On today, Joseph Davis from Microsoft, Security Advisor for Health and Life Sciences. And before the break, we left with a pending question. And I wanted you to kind of address, what is it that people see, should they trust the big companies that become the Big Brother with everybody's data and handling it and being the central security facet for so many people? How do we balance that dynamic?
Well, integrity is a big piece of it, and that's something I had to decide before I joined Microsoft back in November of 2018. I looked at, the cloud ecosystem, and my concern was we've got companies out there that are competing, cloud companies that are competing with their customers in certain ways. Microsoft is not doing that. We have other cloud companies that were based upon a collection of data scientists in the early days, and those data scientists are still there. And they're collecting certain types of metadata out of customers' tenants and so forth. Microsoft absolutely does not do that. The only way Microsoft could ever get into a customer's data is if the customer allowed it, and it's through a lockbox mechanism where it's a time thing and everything is monitored and surveilled, etc. And that's only in dire cases of where the customer really needs our help to click the buttons for them. Furthermore, we don't engineer any government backdoors into anything we do. Everything we design has privacy and security by design as a part of our software development lifecycle. Data privacy is a human right. We all believe that. That's a top-down concept and a top-down principle for Microsoft.
Mm-hmm. How would you, other than our words saying data privacy is a big feature how would we make that transparent to the user and implement that? Look here, we can prove that we're, have your best interest in mind when it comes to your data and your privacy.
Great question, and I'm glad you brought up transparency, because transparency is another core tenet that I didn't mention in the beginning. And how we display and distribute that transparency is through our Service Trust Portal. And we actually have a compliance manager component to that trust portal where you can go in and you can find out exactly how we meet or exceed any number of control frameworks or any number of regulations. And we're absolutely upfront about the data that could be collected for diagnostic purposes. And we give all of our customers an option to opt out. So if you don't want diagnostic data or any of the threat data that might be hitting your tenant to go back to Microsoft, mm-hmm. To add to our threat intelligence graph that I spoke about earlier, you can opt out of that. So there's absolutely no obligation to share any information with us.
Mm-hmm.
We actually have 4 lawsuits pending against the U.S. government to protect our customers' data, right? So, and at the same time, too, if we're compelled by law for any criminal reason to pass over customer data, we're going to inform our customers first and work with the customer and law enforcement in that regard.
Interesting. So, and that's interesting that you have that visibility look into things. As far as where do you see this going? We have GDPR. I heard the right to opt out and everything. So, definitely, I'm sure you're looking at how do you line up with those type of things. But when you're in cloud and everybody's data is on your systems, opting out means not using the cloud at its endpoint. End all be all, where opting out means we're not using the services. So how do you see things coming down the road like GDPR, which I haven't heard of any major fines levied, affecting this environment?
Well, what we did, we were on the forefront of GDPR, and we work with regulators that are really involved with respect to GDPR. And the opt-out, question about opt-out is it's a conditional opt-out, right? So let me give you a real life example of opt-out, right? So there could be error data or threat data, right? My Windows 10 device is under attack, or you want to get some performance metrics off of my Windows 10 device. All that data is genericized, but if I don't want any of that data, say I'm working in a country that is governed by the GDPR, and I don't want any of that data, my Works Council doesn't want it to go up to Microsoft, or I don't want it to go up to Microsoft, I can opt out of that. Same with the performance and behavior of Office 365 and Azure, on and on and on, right? So it doesn't say, we don't say, hey, you just can't get into our cloud unless you sign your life away and sign your data privacy away. We give you the option of what to share and what not to share. And of course, we're never looking at your data.
Okay, well, enough of the hard questions. Let's talk about some fun stuff now. Tell us where you see the industry going for security. Microsoft's got to have some visibility, some stats, some things you can share with us about what does the next 2 years, what does the next 5 years look like?
Well, we're really trying to inspire our customers to adopt multi-factor authentication. So you would think that'd be fundamental, but every session I have with every customer, I say, listen, if you take nothing else away, take away multi-factor authentication if you're using Azure Active Directory, either P1 or P2. Those are 2 license types, right? And even if you're not using Azure Active Directory, find a way to use multi-factor authentication even with another provider, because we found that to be not a perfect solution, but one of the most effective solutions, and use it for everyone. So that's one that really brings us back to the zero trust and identity being the new perimeter or control plane approach to security. Used to be that network security was great. The problem is network security is not very portable. You have to VPN your users back into the network to gain all the benefits of that security. It's expensive, it's hard to maintain, and then you have to have a lot of really smart people to make sure that it's all humming and working correctly. And again, none of that is sustainable, extensible beyond the corporate perimeter. And VPN experiences are usually not that great for the user. So we wanted to make sure that security becomes ubiquitous, right? So whether I'm working from my iPhone device, or if I'm working from my Android device, it really doesn't matter. I have the same user experience and I have the same level of protection.
Interesting. So data, I keep hearing data, Microsoft mostly about data. There's with the market of Internet of Things, you said you were in sensors before and everything. 2018 RSA, Microsoft announced that they had converted their CE platform to a embedded Linux-based platform. Where do you see this market in small devices everywhere going, and is Microsoft playing in that, and what kind of security?
Yeah, we're playing with that with respect to Azure Sphere, where security is built into the chip. It's from the chip up, and the software is built into the chip. With respect to IoT, I provide a lot of advisory around connected medical devices and what to do and what not to do. And we're also starting to see the emergence of smart RFID tags, where you can actually, they can be a passive RFID tag. And this is through our partner, but it also this information can be shared with Azure Cloud, where you can make a scan as far as, I think it's 15 meters away, which is just absolutely incredible for things like, I mean, the approach is, has food been tampered with? Is cold chain being followed? And cold chain is very important for things like the shipment of vaccines, and not just food, right? And maybe we can even apply it to things like human trafficking, right? So if a child and their parents consent, you use an RFID tag on a child in a high-risk area known for human trafficking, and potentially that child can be tracked if that child is ever in danger or is kidnapped, for lack of a better term. So, I mean, there's a tremendous amount of physical security that can be brought to bear with this technology.
Interesting. So what do you see as the things that keep you up, the largest concerns in cybersecurity from kind of the Microsoft big picture point of view?
Yeah, my biggest concern is the rate of adoption, right? And it doesn't have to be Microsoft, but the rate of adoption of our new approach, right? Our new approach being the industry's approach, zero trust, not with network security, but with identity security. Because right now, the rate of adoption for multi-factor authentication for the majority of our customers, and we're talking about multi-factor authentication for all, meaning not just the administrator accounts, everyone. We see the rate of adoption on that to be less than 1%. And the reason that concerns us is because the bulk of the attacks have been identity-based attacks where phishing has been involved. And it's usually the outskirts of the user population. They're not necessarily the knowledge workers. They're the line workers and so forth, the frontline workers, right? And then what the threat actor, the bad actor does is ultimately he or she elevates their privilege, and then they own the directory or Active Directory, if you will. So the sooner we can get our customers to start to adopt multi-factor authentication, I think we can start to level the playing field with regard to those attacks.
Mm-hmm. So I always think back to when we were talking about cloud, and Azure is a big cloud presence, and it grew very fast. When you're talking about adoption of things changing the world, in just 4 or 5 years, cloud exploded. You don't hear much about security on the cloud. Do you think, and what's your thoughts about, is there, we all go on to these cloud services, some small amount of companies out there have big percentages of everybody's data. Do you think there's going to be a major compromise in one of these cloud providers, maybe some third tier or something that doesn't focus on security, and a lot of unrelated companies' data will be compromised?
It's very, very possible, right? So configuration is a key, and that configuration changes a little bit as you move from on-prem to the cloud. And most of the customers I've encountered have a hybrid environment, which means they're still doing the legacy on-prem controls. They're building those into their legacy on-prem applications or just on-prem applications. Mm-hmm. And as they move to the cloud, they have to shift a little bit and utilize what comes with the cloud with respect to security and compliance. But I see the cloud as a force multiplier if an organization or company is very involved in security and compliance, they can leverage what's already up there. It used to be that if you wanted to leverage security on an application, let's just pick on any, like an ERP application on-prem, you have to go out and buy mm-hmm. this, buy that, the other, put things in, wait for rack and stack, et cetera. No longer with the cloud, it becomes either a subscription or it's built in or it becomes a checkbox. And I immediately think of, and again, I'm not trying to sell this, but this is just something that I really, really like, Azure Security Center. So within Azure, any resource you have, and even outside of Azure, you can bring in AWS resources, other resources of third parties, and it's going to do a compliance and security evaluation on every resource you have out there. So if you have storage that's not encrypted or storage that's not configured properly, or if there's a potential access point for a threat actor, it's going to let you know. It's going to tap you on the shoulder. If you choose to ignore it, because again, Microsoft can't come in and take a look at your environment because we don't want to see your data. Mm-hmm. But if you choose to ignore it, the tool is there. But again, if you choose to ignore it and decide to, just go on your merry way, there are going to be compromises. But that wasn't any different than it was on-prem, if you think about it.
Gotcha. All right, so just kind of working here to the end of the show, I always like to give everybody the opportunity to say, what is it that you need to? We have a great big audience of decision makers. What kind of things would Microsoft like to get out to our audience and say, hey, this is either something to focus on, or here's something we offer, here's a new thought process. Any message you have that you'd like to kind of just share with our audience?
Absolutely, foundationally, identity and access management is the cornerstone for the new perimeter, the cloud-based hybrid perimeter. And the other thing is, and it's something I didn't even talk about during the show, but look at technologies that protect data wherever that data goes, right? Stop relying on platforms to protect data. Allow data to protect itself, meaning information rights management, digital rights management, et cetera. And Microsoft does have a series of approaches to this that they also use for data retention. So, I think those are the two main things to think about if you're looking at quick wins in your organization.
Interesting. Well, thanks a lot for joining today, Joseph. It's been a pleasure to hear from yourself and from kind of the direction of Microsoft. So thanks very much for being on the show.
You're quite welcome. Thank you for having me.
We hope you have enjoyed this episode of New Cyber Frontier. Remember, please follow and participate as New Cyber Frontier is supporting a grassroots community effort to empower the individual in the digital age. Check it out at privacyforthepeople.org. Also, make sure to join our mailing list so we can keep you informed. If you have an idea, if you have a question you would like to hear answered, or if you just want to get involved in what we're doing, reach out to us at newcyberfrontier.com. We also encourage you to visit our sponsors links because they are the ones that really make this show possible. We look forward to seeing you on the next episode of New Cyber Frontier.